of our Leopardale Miller. And Colonel Hanson is a full colonel in charge of the testing center, the 96 testing group at Holloman Air Force Base. And he's going to be out visiting Dale and going to give us a great program on what goes on there. Today's speaker, I heard at the service meeting last spring, and I was so taken back by it. I ran up to the room after the program was over, and I said, I got to get this guy for our club. This is going to be one of the best programs we'll ever have. Mike Carter has been at the lab since 1981. He has a bachelor's degree in physics from Indiana University and a PhD in applied sciences from UC Davis. In 2003, he was back at Washington, D.C. to help establish the Department of Homeland Security and was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. And he's going to tell us about his journey through that experience. Mike, come on up.
Michael,
So thanks for having me today. It's really an inspiring group to be around. I know a lot of people in the group. Actually, one of the first people I met when I first came to the laboratory in 1981 was Jay Davis. Everybody in this group knows Jay Davis. Everybody that's been anywhere near Jay Davis knows Jay Davis. and I feel for him, Mary. I had known Jay for about 5 minutes when he handed me a sheet of white paper with a paragraph on it and says, I think this would be a good thesis project. And 6 years later, I got my PhD from that. And I know a lot of other really wonderful people. I've known Peter for a long time too. Obviously Lori and Brian. There's just some great people in the group. But I'm here to talk about me and my experience here. So I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to tell one story today, and I'm going to make 2 points. And those 2 points are that you can, in fact, significantly improve your odds of thriving through the challenges of, for example, cancer, and why we need 2 nuclear weapons labs. And it's really the same point in some odd way. And hopefully when you walk out of here, you'll either be confused or you'll understand where I'm coming from. So anyhow, I want to warn you to start. I've written the book right now, and by the way, it's for sale here. I have a few copies if anybody wants to buy it. It's actually a humorous accounting of my journey through throat cancer. But I'm not Lance Armstrong. One of Lance's quotes was, odd as it sounds, I would rather have the title of cancer survivor than the winner of Tour de France. It turns out that is what he does now. He doesn't have the title. I can remember laying on the couch when I was struggling with chemotherapy, watching the Tour de France when Lance was really thriving there, and I said to myself, I'd love to have the same number of tour victories as Lance Armstrong, and I do. So I want to rewind just before the diagnosis, and I know we all remember where we were, on the morning of 9/11. I was in an airplane at SFO, sitting on the tarmac that got called back, and as a lab employee, I was actually kind of disappointed with how I did. I spent the first couple of days in shock, not really knowing what we could or could not do as an institution. And then we actually got a call and actually got deployed to the World Trade Center to help in the recovery efforts. And I got a chance to walk the pile and have an impact on the strategies and the tactics that were used primarily by the fire department there to actually work their way through the rubble safely using technology that we developed here at the laboratory. So I got enthralled by that at the time, and actually asked at the time Wayne Schatz and the lab director if there was an opportunity for assignment back there. And I in fact had the chance to go back and serve at first in the White House on the transition team that actually stood up the Science and Technology Directorate in the Department of Homeland Security with some other lab people, including our future lab director, Parney Albright, here in the middle. And then, you know, if you rewind yourself back in time, you'll recall that there was also the anthrax attacks in the fall of 2001, not too long after 9/11. And the country, and in particular the White House, was really focused on nuclear terrorism. They were really worried about Saddam Hussein, about loose nukes from the fall of the Soviet Union, et cetera, et cetera. And
At least admit that a nuclear explosion is awesome.
can we turn the volume up? And maybe restart. So,
At least admit that a nuclear explosion is awesome.
You know, people have said
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ding ding.
And then there's about 200,000 dead people, a destroyed city, flames spreading out as far as the eye could see. Massive, inconceivable destruction.
Well, you made it ugly.
so that was the mood of the country at the time, obviously seen from the side of the comedians. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to have the role of leading the science and technology innovation to help stop nuclear terrorism back in the department. But then something happened, and that something started with my realization that I had not given my wife an engagement ring. We'd been married for 21 and a half years. I was away from her. She was still back here in Livermore with the kids, and I was in Washington feeling like I was important. And I bought her a ring. And then for all the men in the room, I think you'll know exactly what I mean, I then had to get up the nerve to give her the ring. Buying the ring was easy, but one thing maybe our wives don't know is we're actually scared to death of you for so many reasons. Some of them real, some of them not. I'm sure that goes for Jay too. But, so over the Christmas holiday, I had this challenge of trying to figure out, how I was going to do this. So I thought, well, I'll just do the normal thing. I'll wrap it in a box, in a box, in a box, in a box. Stick a brick in the box, and she'll work her way through Christmas morning. And then somebody told me that's not romantic. I said, wait, that's my version of romantic. So, this got to be personal between you and your wife. So, okay, I threw that idea away. And day after day over the vacation, I finally, I had plan after plan that I chickened out on. And I found myself in Ruth's Chris Steakhouse in downtown Indianapolis on a Tuesday night on like January 2nd. So I'm already late by a week. I got this ring in my pocket still. And by the way, you can read the long version of this in my book. And it's going to be the molten chocolate cake. She loves molten chocolate. All girls love molten chocolate cake, right? No. So I'm going to give it to her then. Well, the next thing I know, we've got our coats on. We're walking to the car. It's freezing. It's dark. We get in the car. It's all fogged up. There are a few Christmas lights, probably left over from the summer in Indiana. And I finally give her this ring. It's virtually pitch dark. And she sees what it is, and she looks at me and says, "You're pathetic."
What?
That's why we're afraid of them, right? So I was really proud of myself. I finally gave her the ring. Well, life is good. It's a big ring. It's really nice. Blah, 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 blah. The next morning I get up. We're still at our in-laws for the Christmas vacation. I get up and I go in to shave. And I notice there's a bump underneath my neck. Huh, wonder what that is. This is the next morning after giving her the damn diamond, right? So I went in and talked to her mom, my beloved mother-in-law, and said, "You gonna get what that is? It doesn't hurt. I'm not running a fever. It's not red. It has a pretty big bump. You gotta go to the doctor and get that checked out. Yeah, but I'm important. I'm running the nuclear counterterrorism portfolio in the blah, 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 blah. None of that stuff matters. So, about 3 months later, after going to the doctor a couple of times, trying to figure out what it might or might not be, the doctor finally told me I needed to get a CAT scan. So, and I needed to do it now. So much so that, stay 5 extra minutes, get an extra copy of film, and bring it to my office. I want to look at it tomorrow. So I went and finally got the CAT scan. By the time I got back to Washington, D.C., with this awesome office overlooking the mall, not from this angle, obviously, the doctor's office was closed. So we got the CAT scan films up, just like guys do, and stick them up on the windows. At this point, backlit by the Lincoln Memorial, Washington Monument, Jefferson Memorial. And we're all cracking jokes about, oh, hey, you're ugly on the inside too, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there was one doctor in our group, a medical doctor in our group, and he walked up to the window and stuck his finger on the film and said, this person's going to die. And then we all suddenly got quiet. And he said, whose is this? And I said, well, it's mine. And he said, but this could be anything. I'm just an epidemiologist. Well, I took it to the real doctor the next day, and she did the same thing, basically. One finger on the film and said, I need a surgery appointment now. About that time, I realized I wasn't as important as I thought I was, in the overall scheme of life. I really had to take care of myself. So, there's the tumor, there's the finger spot, right, blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
And real quickly I realized that I had to wake up, and not, delay anymore the need to do something. So they did the surgeries. This is my good side at the time. This is the not so good side. They did a full radical neck dissection to, take out all the lymph nodes in my neck. I lost a little weight since then. And then, what do you do next? Right? Well, the first thing I was advised, with a lot of help actually from Christine Hartman at the laboratory, one of the great things about this social network at the lab is that I found out that I had friends that I didn't even know yet. And they came out of the woodwork to help me. Number one, obviously get educated. Be absolutely certain they have the diagnosis right. Because what the medical community will do, they'll put you in a treatment box and they'll treat you. And if you're in the wrong treatment box, you're getting the wrong treatment, and your odds of survival go, obviously go down enormously. And be sure you do everything you can to sustain a positive attitude. So, order number one was to get a second opinion. At the time, I was a Kaiser patient, and I still am. I'm a big fan of Kaiser. I went to Kaiser and said, I want a second opinion. And they said, no problem. We've got a doctor with the office right next to your doctor. You can go visit him. You don't need any new tests run. They can pull up your file. We're all electronic, And he'll look at your slides and look at the case history, and he'll give you a second opinion. I said, that sounds good, but that sounds more like a first opinion a second time.
Yeah.
I'd like an independent second opinion. Okay, we can send you to Kaiser Oakland, where those doctors don't know your doctor, maybe, actually they probably do. You don't have to have any new tests run, we're all electronic, they can just pull up your file. Say, well, that's better, but I want to go to Stanford. They're the best head and neck medical school in the world. And Kaiser said, fine, but we're not going to pay for it. And you're going to have new tests run, and you're going to blah, 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 blah. I said, this is kind of a life or death situation for me. A couple $1,000s to get a second opinion sounds worth it. I'm going to do it anyhow. So I went to Stanford. I got a second opinion, and it took a week with them, a day with Stanford, and maybe a week for the information to basically filter back to me and Kaiser. And the diagnosis was importantly, not dramatically, but importantly different. and it put me in a different treatment box than Kaiser had planned. And I owe those guys something. My lead physician, at Kaiser then went up the management chain and said, this diagnosis is importantly different from what we had. We think we should actually reimburse them and pay for it, and they did. And I don't think that's what they do as a normal course of action, but I actually got my money back. Turns out none of that money matters at all. So the verdict was I was in trouble, partial differentiated, a whole bunch of words that I had never heard of before. Unknown primary. The staging was T2, N3, M0, if you guys know about cancer staging. Some people call it stage 3, some people call it stage 4. But I was in trouble. 5-year survival statistics were roughly 20%, but statistics are funny when you can't get the doctors to talk to you about them. I don't know how many doctors told me it's 50-50, you're either alive or dead. I mean, come on. You had a math class. Oh, you were those pre-med kids that weren't any good at math. I think I remember you guys. So, but it turns out, I was 44 years old, relatively young, nothing else significantly wrong with me. That put me on the better side of the demographics of these, kinds of cancer patients. So, statistically, I probably had a higher probability than 20%. But when you're giving a talk, it sounds more gruesome that way. So the treatment, well, they had, at that point, they'd already done the surgery. They had warned me that the path ahead was going to be rough. It was going to be a combined chemotherapy and radiation treatment, and that I would get to the point where I couldn't swallow food. The throat would be so raw and so painful that you couldn't eat. So they highly recommended a feeding tube. Every person that I know that's in this, in a similar situation resists the feeding tube for the obvious reason. They talked me into it, and I'm really, really glad they did. It sounds way worse than it actually is. Even on the feeding tube, I lost 50-some pounds. Without the feeding tube, I don't think I would have made it. There were some gruesome prognosis. A lot of people we put on the feeding tube decide it's easier to eat with the feeding tube, and they never go back to eating again. And I'm thinking, wait, well, what about my French wine collection over here? Right? There's no way I'm not going to go back to eating. So, it was a combined treatment, 67 grays to the soft tissue in the neck. At that dose, to the spinal column, you don't survive. So they actually try to minimize the dose with a actually very sophisticated way of modeling the dose as you work your way through treatment. And the doctor promised me many times that they would do everything they can to have the treatment not kill me.
What's a gray? In between
What's
a black
a gray?
and a white?
It's actually the biological dose mechanism. So it's, talk to Davis, he knows everything. And then I got the get well card from Edward Teller. He was about 92 at the time, or I don't know how old he was. That's when I knew I was sick. So the radiation treatment to the head is an awful lot of fun. For some strange reason, when I got done with this, I destroyed my mask, and kind of a ceremonial thing. And now I wish I had it as a trophy. So, or maybe I wish I'd cut it in half and destroyed half of it and kept the other half as a trophy or something. But it was a pretty tough time there. A couple of chemo drugs that I really love. One is cisplatin, and the other one, I'll never forget the quote from the nurse. This is 5FU. We don't call it 5FU for nothing. boy, you got that right. So. The big challenge is how did I deal with the emotional struggles? And I want to make a couple of points. The point was actually made in one of the earlier, before I got up view graphs. It's complicated to keep your positive attitude going through all this stuff. when people come to me now, and a lot of people at the lab do, when they first get diagnosed with cancer, the first thing I ask them, every time, the first thing I ask them is, how's your spouse doing? And, sorry? And they look at me like, I'm the person with the cancer. I say, you have no idea how important your spouse is going to be. You need to take care of her. And so, really important, be sure you have a support network. Be sure you value your support network. It's not just your spouse. Your spouse is probably the most important part of that support network, or your kids, or whatever it might be. You really got to value them. The other thing I did is I started to write letters to my friends at the lab, and it started actually with a note, after the first big surgery, to my secretary. I wrote her a letter complaining about the trip that she'd sent me on. What's this Kaiser hotel that I went to? And the room service came in every hour, and the food was... And what happened to my limo? I normally get a limo. My wife drove me? Come on, we gotta do better than this. And she circulated that around the lab for a whole bunch of laughs, of course. Everybody thought I was gonna die, and I was still writing stuff. It was funny. And then I started every Sunday night, I started to write what I call my weekly updates. And the goal every night was to inform people how I'm doing, right? So actually give them information. Try not to scare anybody. One of the problems with cancer patients are that people around you, even your very closest friends, are scared, right? And they don't know what to say. They don't know what to not say. They don't know what the hell's going on either, right? So what they'll typically do is they'll back away from you. Not because they want to, because they don't know any better. So what I tried to do was, every chance I could, look at a situation, and there were many, 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 many documented in the book, things that happened. I had an option. I could get pissed. Why did the doctor say that to me at the wrong time? Or I could write about it in a funny way. These doctors are doing their best. They make mistakes. Strange things happen. So my goal was to find the humor in every possible thing I could. Turns out it's easy. Obviously, encourage dialogue, and I sent this to a, this is in the era before blogging, right? So I had a direct email list of about 250 people, and then they sent it out to others. I still remember one guy, I was about halfway through, he wrote back to me and said, Mike, I really enjoyed getting your letters. I find them inspirational and humorous and all that stuff, but I have no idea who you are. You might want to take me off your distribution list. I had no idea. But again, my goal was to make them laugh and make them cry at the same time. Right? That's when you knew you had the perfect letter. I talked about the support network. My wife, I wouldn't be here without her. I'm lucky I am here with her. Right? I'm lucky she didn't kill me. The closest I came to death by far in this whole, in this whole process was, driving back and forth daily to Walnut Creek on the freeway with me as the passenger and her as the driver. So there, of course, for everybody, there's a rock bottom. My rock bottom, I'd been warned at the very beginning by somebody that I didn't know to watch out for the hiccups. I was like, yeah, I got a 20% survival rate. They're doing this god-awful stuff to me. Watch out for the hiccups. Well, one Saturday in August, in the middle of 5-FU and cisplatin chemotherapy, the hiccups hit me. And you're nauseous from the chemo. The hiccups don't stop. They're so close together that you can barely breathe. I went to the oncologist afterward and said, I'm not going to do this anymore unless you can get rid of the hiccups. And the only drug I found on the internet at the time that does it is Thorazine, which is this antipsychotic drug that they use for violent prisoners. Right? Fine. And by the way, how'd you find that? And I said, well, on the internet. And he said, well, you're reading too much. A lot of doctors say that now as we read. And by the way, right on schedule, the next chemo treatment, almost the same time, the following Saturday, as the hiccups started, one Thorazine and they stopped. It's just absolutely amazing. By the way, this guy also asked me, well, did you try drinking from the bottom of the cup? Or, stand on your head? No, that shit doesn't work. Right? I want the Thorazine. So, as I try to wrap this up, I want to tell a quick story about actually 5 years later. I had obviously survived. I got back to Washington, this time with the family. Now we were back at the laboratory. And I was a stand-in for the Associate Director for Global Security at the time when General Jeff Smith came out to visit. He was a one-star at the time on the Homeland Security Council, working for Steve Hadley, the Homeland Security Advisor. And this is not the first time this question had been asked at the laboratory, but he was basically sent out to the lab by Steve Hadley to come back with and answer to one question. Why do we need 2 nuclear weapons labs? So we had the whole day with General Smith, and we do the thing that we always do at the lab. Start him in the nuclear weapons vault, our beautiful museum, our petting zoo, right, where we can tell all these miraculous stories of innovation, how we competed with Los Alamos and the best idea won, and now the basis of the stockpile, blah, 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 blah. And as we sustained the stockpile since 1992 without nuclear testing, we find problems as we inspect and as we learn more physics. And these 2 labs battle, and we told them this story about plutonium crack propagation and helium embrittlement, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The stories that we're really good at telling, that really float our boats, that we're really excited about. And we spent the whole day doing that. What these guys didn't realize is this guy's a history major. Right? And he doesn't know anything about, why is helium and plutonium? Well, God, that's obvious. I mean, God, it's an alpha there, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Well, so at the end of the day, we're in the skiff in Building 140, and he says, all right, we got 1 hour left. I'm there with the lab director, the head of the weapons program, and me, and Ron Lehman, and Jeff Smith. And he said, all right, it's been a great day. I love the tours. I love discussion, but I need a better answer for why we need 2 labs. So we started down the same path, telling the same story about hydrogen cracks and blah, 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 blah. And I was watching his face, and I realized this wasn't sticking. He wasn't getting it. So I waited for a pause, and I, what the hell? What's George Miller going to do? Fire me? Maybe. There was a pause. I stepped in and said, let me tell a story a slightly different way. 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. And it's a life and death situation. And I had to get the diagnosis right. I told him the first opinion, the second time story. I told him the second opinion story. I told him my story about this journey with Stanford that got me in the right treatment box. This independent second opinion. And 5 years later, I'm still alive. You're here to tell that story. That's why you need 2 nuclear weapons labs. And he turned to George Miller and said, I don't understand a single thing about plutonium, but I get that. And he went back to the Homeland Security Council and told that story. That's not why Lawrence Livermore Lab is still open, by the way. But the question is going to come back up. I'm out of time. So I just want to encourage you guys, everybody needs a bucket list. These are motivational for so many reasons. And it just my off the chart remark is may your bucket list never, never, never be empty. So.
Well, we are out of time. Probably, if you can stick around